What is going on, YouTube? It is your boy, Faithful to God, and tonight we have a treat. We are going to be responding to Judah Natzarah's misunderstanding of Hebrew. And what we mean by misunderstanding is his misunderstanding of the Hebrew language, the history, the promotion of the fraudulent Hebrew dialect, which is affectionately called by its proponents Lasha Kodash. And we have a special guest with us tonight. Brother named Abu. He is from Shield Squad. He's also one of the founders of Truth After Knowledge. If anybody is familiar with, I guess, the earlier to the mid 2000s, the refutations that were going on YouTube, they were one of the first groups to actually go out and defend the faith and refute the bad arguments promoted by One Westers and various other groups. But before we do that, I'm actually going to let the brother Jay get on the mic. Brother Jay, say what's up to everybody, man. I know you actually have something that you're going to be dropping pretty soon. Definitely want you to let the audience know about that, man. So without further ado, I'll let you get on the mic, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. Hey, grace and peace, brothers and sisters out there. The Lord allowed us to, convene once again here on Google Live. Definitely good show ahead of us tonight. Yeah, man. So, you guys already know, most of y'all that know I do music, known as Jay the producer. Been doing a lot of work on the back end, getting ready for this next project that I plan on putting out early next year, called AD or A.D, like the time frame AD, standing for After Deception. Of course, this is my first album post coming out of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. So it's a redemptive album and one of great joy and thanksgiving unto God for bringing me out. And one of the first singles, Lord's Will, be coming out early next year with music video as well. It's called All We Need Is Love. All right, so it's gonna be a little old school kind of disco-ish flavor, man. It's gonna be real cool. Working on some stuff behind the scenes to make sure when it drops, it drops. So yeah, man. So y'all stay tuned for that, man. Y'all get a lot more information right after the turn of this new year comes through. And hey, Lord's will, if you're close to where I'm at in Texas, man, you might be able to get in the video. So you guys stay tuned for that information, man.
That's what's up, my brother. All right. So again, I'm gonna let the audience out there know tonight we are going to be addressing the flawed arguments used by Judah Natzarah in regards to the fraudulent Hebrew dialect known as Lasha Kodash. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Abu, who is, again, a member of Shield Squad. Shout out to Vocab Malone, and also one of the original founders of Truth After Knowledge. Abu, what is going on, my man?
Yeah, how's it going? Good evening. Thank you for having me on. I guess we jump right into this.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, before we get things started, I kind of wanted you to give the audience a brief outline of the dialect Lasha Kodash, where it stems from. For those who may be unfamiliar with the topic, I think this will be very useful for them. And also, if you could kind of show maybe where Judah Natzarah is getting some of his influence from. So yeah, man, I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to you and go right ahead, man.
Sure. Thank you very much. The gist of Lasha Kodash, now the gentleman we're going to be speaking about mainly tonight, a gentleman who calls himself Judah Natzarah. He's one of the members of the Torah Knights. I believe his group is called. They're a somewhat, controversial Israelite group. They reject the term Lasha Kodash, or as we'll be discussing tonight, they recently came to reject the phrase Lasha Kodash, but nonetheless, Lasha Kodash refers to a distinct approach to Hebrew, which by and large is understood to have originated with One West 125th Street, the old Israeli school or Israeli church of universal practical knowledge. The popular history attributes its creation to Arya. Recently, some evidence has come out and attributed its at least early formation to Abba Bivens. And you may see on your screen there, that's Abba Bivens on the right, and that's a young Arya on the left. He was a student of Bivens many decades ago. But Lasha Kodash it doesn't seem to differ from mainstream Hebrew grammatically. Its only real salient difference is it assumes that every Hebrew character has essentially only one possible vocalization. It could be argued maybe two if you treat silent as a vocalization as well. But whatever the case, essentially one vocalization. Every character is basically an ah sound, except in Lasha 1 Kodash, as it was in 1 West, the ayin character was treated as pronounced I. Judah Natzarah diverges from that. He treats it as still pronounced ah. But whatever the case, they would say there's no O's, there's no U's, and so forth down the line. And we're going to discuss that about this idea of whether or not Hebrew, like other Semitic languages, can be vocalized in a variety of ways, whether the characters can be pronounced in different ways. The origins of Lasha 1 Kodash, the very phrase itself, comes from Rabbinic Judaism. It's not found in the Bible. Some of the proponents of Lasha 1 Kodash would argue that it's found in, I think, Zephaniah 3:9, but it's actually not. The precise phrase is not found there. It's found in rabbinic literature. And interestingly enough, when that phrase Lasha 1 Kodash, Ashkenazi communities with their more Yiddish pronunciations, they wound up pronouncing it Loshen Kodesh. This is something that myself and Mike have brought out in the past. Judah Natzarah recently attempted to teach it too faithful to God, but we've been aware of it longer. But anyway, the gist of it is that the Ashkenazi communities that referred to Loshen Kodesh, this was their understanding of the true Hebrew, the true holy tongue. When modern Israeli Hebrew came out, the more insular Ashkenazi communities doubled down on this idea of Loshen Kodesh, which is supposed to be the holy tongue and their distinct pronunciations. And I believe that the founders of 1 West, or the precursor to 1 West in Bivens, was sort of influenced by that rabbinic notion and that impulse in certain circles to reach for this phrase Lashon Kodesh or Loshen Kodesh, and then in their pronunciation Lasha 1 Kodash, and hold up this different pronunciation but not any significant grammatical differences as a badge to distinguish yourself from the speakers of modern Israeli Hebrew. Whatever the case. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just interject for a moment. Now, if you could, just to kind of give people an idea, because we're kind of getting where the name Lasha 1 Kodash originally derives from. Now, where do these different groups that I guess are proponents of the dialect, where do they get the notion, the idea that there are only two vowel sounds? In fact, if you could even go into that a little bit, maybe give a kind of like a brief summary of where Arya went wrong with the concoction, maybe even kind of go into that just a little bit before we actually get into the clips of Judah Natzarah.
Yeah, the chief assumption of Lasha 1 Kodash, and also the variation that Judah Natzarah uses, the chief assumption of it is basically that each Hebrew character has only one possible vocalization, and that a sound needs its own character. So, for example, you'll see proponents of Lasha 1 Kodash, and you'll also see Judah Natzarah make claims like there's no U in Hebrew. And what they mean is there's no distinct character that only represents U, or an U sound. And so that's the chief assumption of it, that every sound, every vocalization has to have a distinct character. Like in English, we have distinct letters for vowels and stuff like that. But the reality is that in Semitic languages, even without distinct markers for vowels, you can vocalize the characters in a variety of ways. If that makes any sense. But we'll get into this as we go through.
Definitely. Actually, you know what I wanted to do real quick before we do that? I'm going to go ahead and send this to the brother so he can present it. It's actually a chart. And I find it a bit ironic because I'll notice that a lot of the proponents of this dialect, and we'll see this later, perhaps even with, well, I'm not going to give away any sort of spoilers, but a lot of people might be surprised to see Torah Nights using this, right? This chart. And coincidentally enough, the chart was actually created by the man that we're talking to tonight, which is our friend Abu. It's actually his chart that he created back in his Free Thought Mecca days. So could you actually talk about that a little bit before we actually get into these clips?
Yes. The funny thing about that is I first did an article on Lasha 1 Kodash way back in 2004, I think it was somewhere around there. And I did it for a website called Free Thought Mecca. It was a website. This is before I converted to Christianity. It was an atheist orientation to the website. And the Phoenician script couldn't be found anywhere on the internet at the time. And so I sat down with the paint program and drew out each character, using the paint program, and set up a little chart of the lot of the Phoenician characters and then the pronunciations of those characters according to Lasha and Kodash. Interestingly enough, someone in around 2007, GMS, picked it up because still there was nothing on the internet about Lasha and Kodash except my article. And so when they got on the internet looking for something on Lasha and Kodash, they could only find my article. And a member of GMS took the image, so I guess spread it around to other members, and also put it on a poster board. So in 2007, there was the very interesting phenomenon of seeing members of GMS hold up a big board with an image that I created to try and teach about Lasha and Kodash. And then years later, just recently, this last August, when the Torah Knights were trying to make a video against Vocab Malone titled something like Vocab Malone Gets Destroyed Again, they put up that exact same image when they sought to teach vocab about, Lasha and Kodash. So it's been fun seeing that image that I created pop up again and again. And I think we'll see this in a clip that we might show later tonight.
Right. Matter of fact, if I could very quickly, let me present the image to the audience. I actually have it on my end. I know that the brother was having some difficulty showing it. So this would be the image right here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Yep. So this would be the. Oh, okay. Here we go. All right. So this would actually be the image, correct? Abu. Okay, I think he muted.
sorry, I'm here. Sorry about that.
So this would actually be the image right here.
This image with the Ashuri script. There was another one. The one that they use is the exact same chart with the Phoenician script, or as they call it, the Paleo Hebrew script.
Okay. So real quick, if I could, I'm gonna just very quickly show the Free Thought Mecca website. So I actually have a bookmark around here, and it's ironic that you mentioned that you actually created this chart many years ago, and then when GMS started doing videos online, they took the chart and actually put it in one of their videos. I think they were kind of giving like a breakdown or something something to that effect, or I don't know exactly what they were trying to do, but they, and one of the guys said something to the effect of, the Holy Spirit put this on the brother to create this chart. It's like, it was like silly, man. One of those things that just goes to show, unfortunately, how far some of these guys will go to try to, take credit for other people's work. But needless to say, all right. So this is actually the Free Thought Mecca. Let me actually make sure. Yep. This is the Free Thought Mecca one, and this would actually be the chart that Abu was making mention of. This would be the chart right here, correct?
Yep, that's it. Yep, and that's the one right there. That one that's on the screen now with the Phoenician characters.
Right.
That's the one that I made in Paint and and wound up appearing on GMS poster boards and wound up getting used by other guys and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. All right. So now that we've actually kind of given the audience a little bit of a brief history of the dialect, let's go ahead and tackle some of the objections that Judah Natzarah proposed in his video, which ironically enough, before we get into that, I think it's important to note that the video was about roughly 50 odd some minutes, right? And throughout the video, Abu, what did you notice? Because I think both of us came to the same conclusion that there was probably about 40 or so minutes of just pure ad hominems and insults, and maybe 10 minutes, if that, of actually going into like objections and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, precisely. The video, I forget the exact title, but it's something like "Faithful to God, Effeminate Christian" or something like that. And it's "Faithful to God, Effeminate" something. I forget what the title is. Right, "Effeminate Christian Chronic." Oh, it's actually something vulgar. But whatever the case, it's a recent video that he did just a few days ago against "Faithful to God," and as "Faithful to God" said, it's nearly an hour long. but it's filled with bickering about something that happened in a private Facebook chat, and then tons of insults and curses, all kinds of homoerotic humor and racial slurs and just nonstop with the cursing and the insults. And if you strip away all that and just reduce it to the actual portions that focus on the language, the Hebrew language, and his claims about what's the truth regarding the Hebrew language, it really is, as Faithful said, essentially a 10-minute video. You know, it's I'm not trying to insult Judah Natzarah, but I do think that he could really condense his videos a lot more and just focus on the arguments, which we're going to attempt to do. And so that's going to be that video is going to be the main focus tonight. That video and then some earlier clips. We're going to get into like what he attempted to teach Faithful.
Right. And before we go into that, just very briefly, I did want to say that the reason why this even got started was because we were initially supposed to do a debate on this specific dialect, right? The whole idea that somehow this is ancient Hebrew and that the Israelites actually use this dialect. And for whatever reason, Judah Natzarah was not comfortable with me wanting to incorporate one Wester into the title, being that the dialect really originates with them. You know, I guess you could say the argument for the dialect originates with them. And it would be no surprise whatsoever, as I told him, if he somehow got the idea for the dialect watching certain One Wester videos when he started getting into the whatever it was that he got into.
And this is interesting. I think this is going to come up in the first clip we're going to show. So in his video attacking in Judah Natzarah's video attacking Faithful to God, there's a point where he brings up the connection between the phrase Lasha Kodash and the Yiddish phrase Loshen Kodesh. And it seems like he's attempting to teach Faithful to God about this, but when the reality is, you know, we've known about this for quite some time. We discussed it on the dividing line,
right? And it's hilarious because, as we're about to see in a moment, well, actually, let's let the video speak for itself. So
to set it up, this is a clip from his video where he's trying to teach you about Lasha Kodash and his connection to Loshen Kodesh, and the implication here is that he doesn't use the phrase Lasha Kodash. You know, that's not a phrase he uses because he's not uneducated like these One Westers. That's the gist of it. But go ahead.
Let's see if that started with One West, which I'm not a part of, but I call it down the middle because I actually do research. I'm not a little emotional. Yiddish is referred to as man-made Loshen. Loshen rhymes with caution. Wait a minute. Loshen rhymes with caution. But if One West says Lasha Wan, just putting a W in there, because if you take the W out, you're going to get Lasha, which just means speech or tongue. It sounds just like what the so-called Yid say. Yiddish is referred to as Mame Loshen, or mother tongue. Loshen rhymes with caution, which means mother tongue. Although it is not entirely clear whether this is a term of affection or derision, blah, 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 blah. Where is it? Lasha Kodash. I'm sorry. They actually came up with this title called Lasha Kodash. Or they call it Lasha Kodesh. Ease from this bullshit. That's what they say. Hold on. Let's see if we can get that. I know I'm wasting time. I'm sorry. Oh, I can't find it. Anyway, it's in here. They call it the Loshen. Oh, I'm sorry. Mame Loshen was the language of women and children to be contrasted with the Loshen, you know. But if our people say Lasha Wan, all of a sudden it's the wrong dialect. But the Yid says Loshen Kodesh. Koi. It's Quadash, but they say Kodesh, the holy tongue of Hebrew that was studied only by men. Loshen Kodesh.
All right, there you have it. He basically makes the assumption that somehow we're unfamiliar with where the name that was later, I guess, rephrased Lasha Kodash by LQ proponents. I think he believes that we're ignorant of that. So, Abu, if we could, I think we should go ahead and present the dividing line show that we were both on. That's very important. We were both on the dividing line where this very topic was brought up prior to Judah Natzarah. But before we do that, I'm going to let you say what you want to say about this.
Real quick, well, the only thing I want to say is just about the time frames. The time frames are relevant here. That video that you just showed, that's from a video that he just did this month, December of 2017. So let's keep that in mind. He's presenting himself as being aware of this in December of 2017, and almost as if he's teaching you about it. We both appeared on the Dividing Line on James White's show. That day it was hosted by Vocab Malone in July. It was July 21st. Of 2016, so roughly a year and a half ago, almost a year and a half ago. So more than a year before he presented this, we already knew this because we touched on it, and you're about to show that clip.
Right. All right, here we go.
The big one for me is the language that they created. That's one that I'm most fascinated by, where they create the Lasha and Kadosh. The interesting thing is, that itself is an attempt it's a repudiation of rabbinic Judaism. It's part of their attempt to pry themselves away from the Jewish community that they were involved in. But the concept itself is taken from rabbinic Judaism. Interestingly enough.
So everyone just stop right there. I want everyone to understand. So they believe this is like a pure tongue of Hebrew. And my basic understanding of how they did it was basically guessing or speculating at the vocalizations of Paleo-Hebrew, because nobody would really know. It's not like we haven't heard it. So, but speculating what they were. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's these rumors about, an angel or something gave it to him and this and that, but it's clear he'd been developing it. But what's so interesting is the phrase itself for the language is not found in the Hebrew Bible. Abu, where is it found?
It's found in rabbinic literature. Lasha Kodash is their pronunciation of a Hebrew phrase, Lashon Kodesh. Now, that phrase doesn't appear anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. Some UPKers will say, "Oh, no, that's not true. It appears in Zephaniah or something like that." But they'll say specifically, I believe, Zephaniah 3:9, which has the King James makes a reference to a pure language. They'll say, "Well, that's a reference to Lasha Kodash." Of course, the phrase doesn't appear in the Hebrew text there.
Right.
That phrase, Kodesh, comes from rabbinic Judaism. It's all over rabbinic Judaism. A number of commentaries, Rashi and Nachmanides, they use this phrase to refer to the Hebrew language. And it gets even more.
This is kind of a presuppositional argument in my takeaway. Now, I'm not saying you sign off in the Sabu, but here's the way I look at it. People are saying this is the pure Hebrew tongue, basically given to us by God in the modern era to restore the Israelite nation. And it gets us away from the tradition of the Talmudist, which is a name they derisively call folks who follow modern rabbinic-style Judaism. However, following their own presupposition that that's what they're trying to do, they betray themselves because the name of the language invented itself comes from Talmudic literature, not from the Hebrew Bible.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. When the Hebrew language was being brought back as a spoken language by a number of pioneers, the most famous one is Eliezer ben Yehuda. When he started doing that, what happened was the pioneers in bringing back Hebrew would meet with the Ashkenazi community, who had a very heavily Yiddish form of Hebrew, and they would tell them that the pronunciations were wrong. Now, most of the Ashkenazis accepted that, and they embraced the form of Hebrew that was largely based on the work of people like Eliezer ben Yehuda, but some communities, especially really, really ultra-religious, ultra-Orthodox communities amongst the Ashkenazis, rejected it. And the interesting thing is there's still these communities that hold on to their Yiddish pronunciations, like, for example, the Satmar community, which is in Williamsburg in upstate New York, and they call their version of Hebrew Lashon Kodesh, which is the Yiddish version of Lashon Kodesh.
Right.
That's their pronunciation. And the thing is, I don't think this is a coincidence.
Yeah.
Aliyah came out of a rabbinic environment, and I believe he got that idea of Lashon Kodesh, from his rabbinic environment.
Now I'm going to show.
Yeah. So basically, as we heard in the clip, clearly Abu is very familiar with this topic. This is not unfamiliar to him whatsoever. I was familiar with this topic as well, and I was also on the show. In fact, the irony of ironies is I believe at the very end, I made mention of something that I'm going to bring out a little later, where I did a contrast between Hebrew and Yiddish, because a lot of the proponents of this fraudulent dialect known as Lasha Kodash will make the assertion that modern Israeli Hebrew is somehow Yiddish, when the reality is that modern Israeli Hebrew and Yiddish are in fact two completely different languages. And so in other words, when you hear phrases like Elohim, or when you see something like let me think, like Elohim or Shibboleth, that somehow they make the assumption that that's Yiddish when in fact that's actual Hebrew, right? But I find it interesting because here we are on a program way earlier than him, bringing this information, the information out, and then coincidentally, what is it, a year and change later, he comes out and tries to use this on me as some sort of dagger to thinking that I was somehow ignorant of this fact, and or that we were ignorant of this fact.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder if the reality is, and again, this is only my speculation, I'm not saying this is true, this is me simply putting it out there. Could it be possible that he saw that episode of The Dividing Line, and that's where he got his first introduction to the fact that that's where the name for that dialect presumably came from?
Well, at this point, based on what we've shown so far, he might be able to say, all right, y'all knew it, you guys knew it for a year and a half, and I've always known it as well. So we just independently of one another always knew that, Lasha Kodash is sort of just an adaptation from Loshen Kodesh. By the way, I think we have a screenshot of a Facebook post where he alludes to this as well. You think we can show that? Sorry to segue here, but it's relevant to this.
And let the brother Jay actually bring that out real quick. And
yes, this is something he wrote on Facebook. Again, as you can see, December 11th, so it's this month as well. He says that's fine. Lashen Kadesh, he puts, is a Yiddish Jewish term, not a One West creation. These Luciferians cleverly avoid the fact that One West started under Edomite rabbis, so that Lashen Kadesh is something they picked up from rabbis. All right, so this is Judah Natzarah this month, showing that he doesn't use Lasha Kodash. He doesn't use that phrase. How, and this sort of falls into that frame of like, how dare you connect me to One West, because that was his argument against Faithful, against you, that, like, you're going to try and conflate me with One West, but I don't, I'm not like them. I'm different from them. That's his argument. And so this falls into that theme that he doesn't use this. So now we might say at this point, well, maybe he always knew it and we always knew it, independent of one another.
Right.
But here's the thing. As recently as August, there were members of the Shield Squad, not the Shield Squad, forgive me, members of Torah Knights who were still using the phrase Lasha Kodash as recently as this last August. I think we have a clip on that.
Yep, definitely going to bring out that clip. I mean, it's amazing to me when you think about the fact that it seems like these guys are constantly contradicting one another in a lot of the assertions that they make. We're going to see this right now. All right, so let it play, Brother Jay.
That language is speaking, but if you mean Yahweh, the God of the Hebrew Scriptures, yes.
Okay, Yahweh is the name of the Judean king.
Wait, hold on 1 second, brother. Could you pause that for a moment? Actually, go back. Let me actually give the audience a little bit of a background of what's going on here. So basically, Vocab appeared on Torah Night on one of their live hangouts. And essentially, they were preaching him to basically say Yahweh Akkad, right? In the
Yahweh Akkad.
Yahweh Akkad in the fraudulent Lasha Kodash dialect. And Vocab neglected to do so because he said he does not at all subscribe to that fraudulent dialect because it is not actual Hebrew, right? It basically, he's about to explain in this clip, as we're about to see. And it's going to segue into what we were talking about a moment ago.
Yeah, so to give this background, this is when he appeared on a Torah Nights Hangout, Google Hangout. And so this is a clip from that Hangout. This is actually a video from August. And it was made not by Judah Natzarah, but by another member of the Torah Nights, who shows this clip of Vocab resisting using Lasha Kodash. And then he attempts to teach Vocab Lasha Kodash. Go ahead.
That language is speaking, but if you mean Yahweh, the God of the Hebrew Scriptures, yes.
Okay, Yahweh is the name of the Judean king. Okay?
Right, but how come you didn't answer the question? Why you say I don't hold to the Torah? Why you say that? I don't get it.
I said, you believe in Yahweh Khan, and you just said, no, I don't believe in that language. Now, we are the
I don't
people.
believe in semantics. I don't agree with your linguistic construction, but the concept of the person you're talking about, you mean the God of the Hebrew Scriptures? Yes, I do serve him. But what I'm asking you is that those aren't even the same question. Holding the Torah, how is that? What I'm saying is, why do you say we don't hold the Torah? Why?
All right. This is the Lasha Kodesh vocab Malone with the short vocab. You did. And we're going to go through this alphabet first. And then we're going to show you how there's no way possible that the name Yahweh can be Yahweh. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And
yeah. So this video, I think this video disappeared because I couldn't find it. I'm glad we still have the clip because that video was titled something like "Vocab Malone Gets Destroyed Again," and that's where a member of the Torah Knights tries to teach vocab about Lasha One Kodash. Now he's showing a clip from a Google Hangout. Yeah, by the way, you notice
Right.
he used the exact same
He
chart
used the
that I
exact
created
same chart.
in 2004. You know, so he's going to teach all of us about something that, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
but
right.
So, but the thing is, I want to point out the dates. So, first off, we mentioned earlier in December, this month, December of 2017, we see Judah Natzarah trying to give the impression that, you know, he doesn't use Lasha One Kodash, and he's going to teach you about its origins, you know, and he's going to teach us about its origins. But we showed that about almost a year and a half before he attempted to do so, we were already covering this subject, the connection between Lasha One Kodash and Loshen Kodesh. And then the clip that we just showed is from August of this year. So as recently as August, a member of the Torah Knights was still using the phrase Lasha One Kodash. Now, at this point, Judah Natzarah could say, you know, that's just an error that he made. That's, you know, that's not necessarily Judah Natzarah's fault. You know, his group is somewhat unwieldy. Maybe they have different levels of learning. So it's possible one member is ignorant of something that Judah Natzarah always knew. That could be the excuse he could use up to this point. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that we're about to bring out something that undermines that sort of argument. So, Brother Jay, if you could bring that out, please. Oh, what is this that we have here? Interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No. I'm gonna let you go, brother. Go ahead.
So I don't know if people on the screen can see it. This is, and you can find this still on his page. We wanted to show a screenshot because it's at least possible it might get taken down. This is a video from February of 2017. So this video is a good 7 months, almost 7 months after we appeared on the dividing line. And he's still using the phrase Lasha One Kodash. His video is titled Lasha One Kodash, the Abaray language. And, you know, so he's presenting Lasha One Kodash as true Hebrew. He's using the phrase himself in the title of his video, in the graphics of his video. So Judah Natzarah himself was still using the phrase as recently as February of 2017. That's interesting. You know, so he did recently learn this connection between Lasha One Kodash and Loshen and the Yiddish Loshen Kodesh, or just the rabbinic Lashon Kodesh. And I think one possible place where he could have learned this is Vocab. And I was on Vocab's show. Vocab had a show titled in August when he was responding to that attempt by the Torah Knights to teach him about Lasha One Kodash. Vocab put out a video titled Lasha One Kodash Takedown. And we covered it in there as well. If people want to go to that video, around the 1 hour, 8 minute mark, we cover the same material that we covered in the dividing line with just a few more graphics.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let the Brother Jay present this on the screen. And it was roughly around, let me see. I actually have it right here. It was roughly around, I want to say like an hour and 8 minutes in to about an hour and 22 minutes.
Yeah, we don't have to show the whole thing, but we could. It's going to cover stuff that
we're not going to show. We're just going we'll present it so that the audience can find it. Mm-hmm. So to the Brother Jay, I'm actually putting it in the internal chat right now. So if you could just go ahead and present this to, you know, just to let the audience know where they can find it, you know, what it looks like. So it's actually on Vocab's channel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, precisely. Lasha One Kodash Takedown is its title.
All right. All right, to the Brother Jay. All right, there we go. All right. And that's the video right there.
And speaking of which, this video also shows that clip, the same clip that we showed of them trying to teach him Lasha and Kadosh by using the very chart that I created around 2004. But yeah, so this is from August. This is this whole thing, and we covered it there. And then after this point, all of a sudden, Judah Natzarah knows that Lasha and Kadosh comes from Yiddish or comes from Rabbinic Judaism. It's a rabbinic phrase.
Right. All right. So with that being said, I definitely wanted to, maybe if we could. Oh, a lot of. Definitely wanted to see if we could, kind of talk about a little bit before we go into the next segment. Isn't it interesting that the different proponents of this dialect will use the dialect as a dagger against those who do not subscribe to it? So, for example, if you don't say Yahweh Akkad in that dialect, somehow you're not really a servant of God. Or, for example, if it's GMS, they'll have this thing is, what's the name? Say the name. What's the name? Something to that effect. If you could kind of maybe talk about that just briefly, if you've seen that in your personal encounters with GMS and other groups who hold to that dialect, because I can tell you that I've personally witnessed them using it again as a dagger, making it a salvation issue. That basically, if you're not saying whatever, say, almost like sacred namism, if you're not saying this specific pronunciation in this dialect, then you can't be saved.
Yeah. Well, One West, Judah Natzarah says he's not influenced by One West, but I think it's obvious that he has been influenced by them. He used to use the very phrase that they use, Lasha Wan Kodash. His own members of his group used to use that phrase. But not only that, another thing that he does is One West trained first its members, and then this One West splinter groups trained the people that they've influenced over the internet to assume that if people use pronunciations outside of the simplistic system that they have, then they're just speaking Yiddish and they don't know Hebrew, and you can just disregard everything they say. And this is sort of like a false tool that they use, or a false weapon that they try to use against people. You see this all the time. People who don't know any Hebrew will say, they'll say, we'll break that verse down in the Paleo Hebrew. That's their thing, But it's the reality is that while they present themselves as being the only ones who know the true language, you're almost required to be ignorant of Semitic languages to adhere to this. And I forgive me, I know that sounds very disrespectful. It's not my intention to disrespect people in that regard, but really that I would say that's the case. Right.
Indeed. And ultimately, the end goal is to get these individuals to, stop using bad arguments. And I think the other thing is that we want to ensure that they have a proper understanding of the scriptures, which I do not believe that Torah Nights has. And I think the same goes for any of the other Lasha Wan Kodash proponents, whether it be GOCC, GMS, ISUPK, and so on and so forth.
Well, actually, there's one interesting thing, and I think this allows us to segue into a somewhat of a new topic on Judah Natzarah. When I did that article on Lasha Wan Kodash back in around 2004 for the Free Thought Mecca, it was in response to a member of, I think it was a member of House of Israel, who was challenging me on the subject. And with him, and then with many other One Westers over the years, I've tried to convey to them an understanding of how Hebrew works, how Semitic languages work, by appealing to Arabic. Now, all of them resisted it. I mean, every single One Wester would be like, "Oh, you think Hebrew is Arabic? Well, let me teach you something. They're not the same language. Newsflash. This kind of arrogant stuff." Because the thing is, as we mentioned earlier, their assumption is that there's a one-to-one correspondence between character, written character, and vocalization. So in order to have a certain sound or a certain vocalization, you need a distinct character. So when in reality, in Semitic languages, you can have a character vocalized in a variety of different ways. Like if you take the ba, the second character in Hebrew, the bet, it's called in Hebrew, it can be pronounced be, bi, bu, bo, in these different ways. It can be vocalized without a distinct character representing that. Now, Hebrew and Arabic and Aramaic came to take on certain diacritical marks to represent these vocalizations, but it's nonetheless the case that there is not a direct one-to-one correspondence between character and vocalization. A single character can be vocalized in different ways in Semitic languages. Now, I always tried to demonstrate that by appealing to Arabic, and it never worked. Interestingly enough, Judah Natzarah says that we should turn to other living Semitic languages like Arabic to try and understand Hebrew. And I applaud him for that, but unfortunately, he doesn't understand what's going on with Arabic, and he winds up making bizarre claims about Arabic as well. I think we have some clips for that as well.
Right, we're about to see the first one right now. Your brother Jay. The Semitic languages one. Go where it says Semitic languages. Yep, there you go. All right.
Because you can't go to the Greek letters to figure out certain things in Hebrew. You have to go to living, quote unquote, Shemitic languages such as Ethiopic and Arabic, right? Even though there's like many dialects of Arabic, it's still a living language. Like Ishmael did not die out.
Okay. With regards to that, first off, I want to say with him, like I said earlier, I applaud him for inviting people to go to Semitic languages, to turn to Arabic for insight. But as I said, his assumptions are strange, because the same sort of one West approach to Hebrew, he applies even to Arabic. He says that if you have pronunciations in Arabic that aren't represented by distinct characters, then that's Yiddish. I think we have a clip where he even accuses me of the name that I use online, my nom de web. He says it's Yiddish.
Oh man! All right.
Correct. That's you guys. So actually, you're even further removed because you have a U, Abu, in your name, and there's no U in Arabic. And you know your name is supposed to be Arabic. Actually, your is Yiddish. But
okay, that's a very short clip just to show him that he accuses even the name Abu Hamad. He's like, that's Yiddish.
Can I just point out
that
before we go into that? Isn't it ironic that his very name is Judah with a U, Natzarah? Now, granted, he even said this to me when we had our discourse in that private chat when we were trying to set up a debate. He pointed out that he knows that that's an improper pronunciation, yet still promotes that improper pronunciation in his very name, which I still find to be quite ironic. And yet he's making these allegations against you because your name has you. But I'll let you get into that. And I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, I think that helps us set up another clip to show that what he's saying, this is something we alluded to before, he's under the impression that any sound, any vocalization in a Semitic language has to have a distinct character to go with it. So I think we have another clip coming up where he tries to show that there's no U in any Semitic language. If we could show that to help set up the discussion on this.
The word lamad means to teach. Where they get the U from, we already explained the letter U does not come from the so-called Hebrew or any of these languages, but it comes from I'm sorry, let me get my, where is it? Okay, there is no U in the Syriac, Aramaic, in the Ethiopic, in the Akkadian, in the Arabic, in the Phoenician, in the Yemeni. There's no U. There's only Wa. Okay, the Phoenician, Arabic, Nabatean, early Arabic, modern Arabic, Syrian, modern Hebrew. There's no U. There's only Wa. Okay, the Ugaritic and Phoenician, Wa. Okay, there's no U, and you're not going to be able to pull a U out of your on us because we're going to detail you to death. Okay, Assyrian, Aramaic, Wa. Okay, but okay, we're going to get into Arabic, and we're going to have that pronunciation, and it's going to say Wa. Okay, Assyrian alphabet. Okay, Wa.
I think we missed the part. It's cool if it got cut off, that we may have missed the part. There's a part where, and we don't have to show it, but there's a part where he shows a printout of something that he did on Google Translate. He went to Google Translate and put the Arabic letter character Wa in by itself, just standing alone, and got back like a W or like Wa or something like that. And said, and his printout of this Google Translate situation, he took as evidence that that's the only sound it could make. Of course, if he went to Google Translate and put in a word like, a word that's spelled with wa, like Yahud, rather than just the wa by itself, he would get a pronunciation that has that oo sound in it, but he wants to just throw it in there in isolation, and it's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I look at this and I say to myself, here you have a guy who, for all intents and purposes, I think is really just arguing against the dialect, which is, the one that he claims is Yiddish, which is in fact actual Hebrew. I think he's doing it because he has this sort of belief where if the Jews in the state of Israel, or even Jews abroad, the people that he would consider to be quote unquote so-called Jews, and I'm not just saying Ashkenazis, but any Jew that he would label so-called Jew, if they're using that dialect, then somehow it can't be right, because in order for his worldview to be correct, everything that they promote has to be wrong. I almost get that kind of one-to-one correlation where it's like, basically, if they're promoting I wouldn't even say promoting, if they're using the dialect, if it's the dialect that they speak in, and we present evidence for it, he cannot legitimately, from his worldview, embrace it, because embracing it somehow means he's actually giving them something. He's basically, he feels that, and I guess he would feel that by giving them something, he has to give up something. By the same,
Agreed. The strange thing is the way he appeals to his sources, because he says that he wants to do outside research. Don't just don't just appeal to these Yiddish speakers and all that. He said stuff like that. So all his research is all on the internet, and he doesn't understand the sources that he's appealing to. And sometimes his sources just blatantly don't agree with him in just humorous ways. I mean, like, he'll point to a source and say, "Look, this supports what I'm saying," and like right there on the page, you can see that it doesn't. And I mean, we could show a particularly egregious example, actually. The last character of both Hebrew and Aramaic, including Syrian Aramaic, is generally called Tau, right? Mm-hmm. And he insists that its only pronunciation is Tha. That's the only way it can be pronounced. And he'll hold that even in Syrian Aramaic, it's Tha. But he'll say, look, right here, look at this. And he points to a chart for Syrian Aramaic, and he goes, it's Tha, not Ta. But yet in his own source, it says Ta right there on the page. Can we show that in the clip? I mean, this is small, but it's a funny example to help set up this, set the theme of him not understanding the sources that he's using, or just missing that his sources blatantly disagree with him.
All right.
But this I'm wrong, even though clearly the Tha is Tha, not Ta.
Yeah, I don't know if you could see that. I hope maybe it was too blurry, but on his own page it said Ta, and he's like, it's Tha, it's not Ta. Yeah, right there in his own source. Like, I'm going to appeal to the source and teach y'all something,
Amazing.
But let's if we can, to show a better example. That was a very minor example. There's one where he attempts to show that vowels were added to Arabic just like they were with Hebrew. Now, I want to try and set this up, I want to try to explain the mindset of the proponent of Lasha Kodash, or whatever Judah Natzarah is calling it now, but the mindset of them versus the actual history of Semitic languages. So the history of Semitic languages, both Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, is such where, as I said earlier, a single character can be vocalized multiple different ways. And then at certain points in history, diacritical marks were introduced. In the case of Hebrew, it's the dots and dashes, the nikudot, it's called, to signify vocalizations, to help people who are new to the language, like children, or people who speak a foreign tongue or now learning the language. They help them learn the pronunciations. Someone who knows the language well doesn't really need these diacritical marks. And they were introduced into Hebrew, into Arabic, into Aramaic. And so the assumption of proponents of Lasha Kodash is that is when the vocalizations were introduced.
Well, real quick, can I just say something before we actually go to the clip? It's ironic because I know several people who have gone to Israel, and they make mention that when you buy a newspaper, it doesn't have the diacritical marks in the newspaper. It'll just have the plain, Hebrew, the square script, right, without the marks. You know, generally speaking, if you get a newspaper, if you and I'm talking for the local person, the person who actually lives in Israel, when they read any sort of literature, you know, if they're looking at a magazine, typically or generally speaking, it will not have the square script, right? For the local people, they don't need it because they understand the language, correct?
They don't have the dots and dashes, the Nikodot,
Right.
yeah.
Right. But yet, for whatever reason, I think that, like you were saying, they seem to be of the belief that the marks are somehow introducing vowels like into the square script.
Exactly.
Right, but we'll see this a little later. You know,
The reality is that the vocalizations existed for many, many centuries.
Right.
You know, then perhaps as long, I would assume, as long as the language, as far back as we can go in history, in terms of evidence of how Hebrew pronunciation is, the vocalizations existed many, many centuries before, like the Masoretic text, before vowels or, you know, the diacritical marks were introduced. So the vocalizations existed, and then at a later time, people created symbols to represent these vocalizations that existed for centuries. So that's the key point to keep in mind. Proponents of Lasha and Kodash, including Judah Natzarah, think that with the introductions of these symbols, they introduced the vocalizations. The reality, the historical reality is, and we're going to demonstrate this, is that the vocalizations existed for a very long time, and then the symbols were created. And you actually see this with the Latin script now. When we write in English, there's like a phonetic alphabet that exists that can be used to help explain how words are pronounced, even in English. Because like we might, spell a word a certain way and use the letters one way and then pronounce it differently. Like, for example, the example that I like is wind and wind. Like I wind my watch, or the wind is blowing. These two words are spelled exactly the same, but we pronounce them differently. Now, you can get into like the phonetic alphabet which will, for linguists, which will talk about the different pronunciations of the letter I, and they would create new characters to represent a vocalization that's existed long before these new characters were created,
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're actually
to set that in, I'm sorry, just to show what we're about to show now is him misunderstanding this distinction and assuming that just like what they believe about Hebrew, that it's also true of Arabic, that somehow the vocalizations were added in the 7th century. So check out this source that he uses.
All right, so to get this is the Arabic alphabet. They added more letters to the alphabet. That's a fact. Any Muslims out there or Moors who want to debate that, I will smash you. They added more letters to the alphabet, the Arabic alphabet. They added more. And they added what is called diacritic marks to like formulate vowels. Diacritical markers were added for non-Arabs. Let's just pull this up so you can see what Quran alone, best hadith of Allah. Let's see what time we at. 41. All right. The original manuscript of the Quran does not have the signs indicating the vowels in the Arabic script. One more time. The original manuscript of the Quran does not have the signs indicating the vowels in the Arabic script, just like the Hebrew. In addition to the diacritical marks, there are other forms of vocalization marks that change the pronunciation and meaning of a given word. These marks include the Dhamma, Fatha, Kasra, Shada, Skun, Mada, etc. They are put above or below the letters to affect its pronunciation. Watch this. The Arabs did not require the vowel signs and diacritical marks for correct pronunciation of the Quran, since it was their mother tongue. Okay? They didn't require vowel sounds and diacritical marks for the Quran. For Muslims of non-Arab origin, however, it was difficult to recite the Quran correctly without the vowels. These marks were introduced into the Quranic script during the time of the 5th Umayyad Caliph Malik al-Marwan, 66 to 86, I think it's Hijrah, 685 to 705 Christian era, during the governorship of al-Hajjaj in Iraq. Okay, wait a minute. These marks were introduced into the Quranic script. The Quran did not have vowels in it, just like the Torah doesn't. But somebody was adding in diacritical marks and this and that and whatever, right? And then adding in their own vowels.
So there you see it. Now, the funny thing is, he's under the impression that this shows that vocalizations like just like a u sound, like the the u sound in Yahud or something like that, or even a shorter u sound in Muslim or Quran or something like that, were introduced in the 7th century when these markings representing these vocalizations were introduced. The funny thing is that he seems to miss that his source doesn't agree with him. The very source, which is some submitter site that he found online, it doesn't agree with him, because notice that it's still referring to the Quran as, the Q-U-R. They're putting a U in their transliteration, and they put it in they have the word Muslim, and they have a letter U, or even they mention hadith. They put an I in their transliteration of hadith, so clearly they're not saying that these vocalizations were introduced, rather symbols were introduced, and it clearly says that for people who didn't really know the language. Now, I would go a step further and say that it's also to preserve a pronunciation, because the truth is that pronunciations change over time. So both with the Masoretic text and also with the Quran, these diacritical marks were introduced to preserve the vocalization, so that people would understand it from generation to generation how it was pronounced, because otherwise there might be disputes over time. So that's the point, is to preserve the pronunciation that existed at that time. But he doesn't seem to understand that. You could see the source doesn't agree with him, and I think that's a very good example of how he he appeals to sources which don't agree with him.
Which is ironic, because I noticed in some of the clips that at times he was even using Lou White. And for those who don't know, Lou White is a Hebrew roots proponent, man who, for all intents and purposes, is not only a novice, but also a complete false teacher. And yet, he's using Lou White's, I guess he went to his website, he printed out the article, and ironically enough, Lou White believes that God's name is, if I'm not mistaken, Yahuwah. He uses that pronunciation, and he refers to Jesus Christ or even Joshua as Yahusha or something to that effect. And here he is employing the U, which somehow it's ridiculous. I really don't see why he uses these sources that ultimately end up contradicting him anyways, right? But
this actually allows us to segue into another section vis-a-vis Judah Natzarah, and because now what he would say, if we stop the video right here, let's say we just cut it short right here, was all right, we're done, we've sufficiently refuted him. What he would say, because he said it before, he would say, "Oh, they just believe, they're just following those gutter rats, they're just following, and he said that many times about you, faithful, that you just take the word of these Ashkenazi Jews, that's it. You're just siding with them," which is, of course, a very gross misrepresentation,
Right. Well, could I just say this very quickly? It's ironic, because in my research, the one thing that I definitely try to do is go into the text that the Israelites themselves translated. For example, the Septuagint. This is well before the time that the Jews were scattered into Germany, or that they were scattered anywhere else, excuse me, let me correct myself. This is before the time that Jews were, scattered abroad in every direction, in the fashion that they were. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't Jews that were scattered. Obviously, there were absolutely Jews that were scattered. But needless to say, it predates the Masoretic text, talking about the Septuagint, by, I want to say, close to over 1,000 years. I want to say more than 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. And yet we find in the Septuagint transliterations that in many instances line up exactly with the Masoretic text.
Exactly. Not always, but by and large. By and large.
Exactly.
And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it seems like these sort of facts are lost on him. Now, I think for any studious researcher who looks into this topic, they're going to realize that arguing from his perspective is a lose-lose, because number one, it shows that either he is very unfamiliar with the history of the Hebrew language, he's unfamiliar with the way that the Israelites would have transliterated text into, Greek or, whatever language that they were using. And it also shows that he's almost strawmanning us, those of us who are obviously showing the holes in his arguments, by misrepresenting our position, making us seem that somehow we're just, and I notice this too with other Lasha Kodash proponents like GMS. tend to be very conspiratorial. So anytime they begin to undermine their polemics against whatever topic that they're going for at the time, immediately the conspiracy theorist comes out in them, and they're, oh, see, they're just getting that, because they take everything that these guys say, or they're brainwashed, or in certain cases they might even allude or make up claims on us on this whole thing of, oh, they're agents, they're being paid off, the Ashkenazi Jews, they're paying them off. Like, come on, man, it's ridiculous. Just completely false statements. But
now here's the thing. So because we got into this, you mentioned the Septuagint, and I agree with you 100%. I think this is the knockdown argument to demonstrate that the idea of a single character in the Hebrew text or the Aramaic text being vocalized in a variety of ways long predates the Masoretic text, and thereby proving that the Masoretic text did not introduce vocalizations. It only introduced symbols representing vocalizations that existed long before the Masoretic text was written. But we already showed a clip when we showed that clip of Judah Natzarah saying that you need to go to living languages like Arabic. He said at the beginning of that clip, you can't go to Greek. And so I think we need to address this, because let's say we stopped right here, we just appealed to the Septuagint and dropped it. He would say that, oh, you can't go to Greek, you can't go to Edomites or whatever, not understanding the significance of the transliteration. Now here, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards Judah Natzarah. I know we disagree sharply with him, but it's not my intention to disrespect him. But nonetheless, I would have to say, and I hope I'm forgiven for using such sharp language, but I have to say that there's a double-mindedness here. There's evidence of a sort of cognitive dissonance in rejecting the transliterations in the Septuagint, yet unwittingly showing an understanding of the process of transliteration in his own notes. If we could, I'd like to show a clip of his own transcriptions in the Latin script according to the English phonetic system. If we could show the notes, and then we'll discuss why this is significant. This is a clip of him showing his own notebook.
Jay, you gotta unmute. You gotta unmute and go back. Yeah.
Camel is Gamal. It's Jamal in Arabic. Child is Yalad in Hebrew. It's Walad in Arabic. The day is Yom in Hebrew. It's Yom in Arabic. Death is Maf or Mawaf in Hebrew. It's Mawat in Arabic. A dog is Kalab in Hebrew. It's Kalb in Arabic. A donkey is Kamar in Hebrew. It's Himar in Arabic.
All right. Now, here's why this is significant. Suppose, for whatever reason, suppose after we're all gone, Judah Natzarah, so let's suppose we pass on, everyone who ever knew Judah Natzarah passes on, he himself passes on, and let's say for history loses all audio and video clips of Judah Natzarah, right? So we have there's no one that knew him or heard him exists anymore. He doesn't exist anymore, and no audio or video clips of him exist anymore. If we had just this notebook, we would know from this notebook how he understood the pronunciations of certain Hebrew and Arabic words. He used the Latin script according to the English phonetic system to transliterate his understanding of the pronunciation of Hebrew and Arabic words. The transliteration in his notebook captures his understanding of the pronunciation. Now, it's the exact same thing with the Greek New Testament and the Septuagint and even the Vulgate. You have these ancient transliterations. In the case of the Septuagint, you have people who understood the Hebrew of the Hebrew Bible and are translating it into Greek, and they're transliterating certain names. And their transliterations show how those ancient, it preserves how those ancient translators understood the pronunciation. If you want to go ahead and comment on that.
And, I did want to say this, though, that you're mentioning that in different languages, you have certain pronunciations that are, for example, preserved. In the Septuagint, again, just going back to that for a moment, does that in a lot of cases for the different pronunciations that actually undermine Judah Natzarah's own polemic against the Masoretic text, because here you have, for all intents and purposes, a Greek translation which is preserving these pronunciations, which he claims is Yiddish, and yet these pronunciations predate the existence of Yiddish.
By a millennium, by more than a millennium.
Right. Not to mention, we're going to get into the whole polemic of Hebrew and Yiddish in a moment, because I think that either he's being willingly deceptive in that he's trying to present this narrative where he's like pejoratively referring to the Hebrew dialect as Yiddish, or, either he's being willingly deceptive or he's just absolutely unfamiliar with the difference between actual Yiddish and actual Hebrew, or even, modern Israeli Hebrew and actual Yiddish.
Yeah, no, I agree. Matter of fact, let's show this next clip of his transcriptions, and we can actually see an example of that, I think, if we can.
Make it one more real quick to show you. We is a nakana in Hebrew, for nachnu in Arabic, and anahnu in Yiddish. Water is mayam in Hebrew, miya in Arabic, and magim yim. We get your ooze, yim in Yiddish. Let's go up real quick. The word for spirit is rawah or rawak in Hebrew. Ru in Arabic, ruah in Yiddish.
Okay. So now there's a. Go ahead. You want to comment on this, because there's so many things to say here, man.
No, I'm gonna let you start. I mean, this is wow.
First off, here's the funny thing. Now keep in mind, this clip is from an older video. That video where he was saying that the name Abu is is Yiddish because you put a U in the transliteration. So that this clip is earlier than the clip where he brought up the idea of Yiddish Arabic. Notice here his own transliteration of Arabic words, like the word for spirit, ruh. He has a U in it, or the word for we, the pronoun, the first person plural pronoun in Arabic, nahnu. He has a U in his own transliteration. That's ironic. That's a minor irony. But also, to get to that pronoun, the pronoun for we, the first person plural pronoun, he says the Yiddish, he's actually pointing to standard Hebrew, whether it's biblical Hebrew, the Hebrew of the Masoretic text, or modern Israeli Hebrew. He points to it. He says anachnu, and he says that's Yiddish. It's not Yiddish. The we in Yiddish is very similar to German. It's mir for we if it's in the nominative. Like if we are going to do something, it's mir, and then in the accusative, it's uns. Like in German, they say like Gott mit uns, God is with us. It's in Yiddish, it's uns. So anachnu is not Yiddish. It's not even close to the Yiddish. He's pointing to Hebrew. And here's another irony. Remember that it was he himself who said that we should go to Semitic languages like Arabic, living Semitic languages, to understand how Hebrew works. Now, he's saying that the proper pronunciation of this pronoun is anachnau or something, or anachnawa or something like that. But what you see is if you use his own suggestion of appealing to Arabic, the Arabic in this case supports the Hebrew. It's nachnu in Arabic, anachnu in standard Hebrew. So that would seem to mean that it's not what he in this case the Arabic works against it. But I'll let you go ahead and take.
I wanted to say that you have people in the live audience says he refuted himself, and they're like face palm, cut his own branch. I mean, it's oh my goodness, man.
If we can, though, maybe we should get into an example of like the Septuagint vis-a-vis the Masoretic text, and then also why don't we touch on also the other Semitic languages, since he wants to appeal to Arabic, and let's use the name of Jesus. He claims he wants to distinguish himself from One West. One West claims the name of Jesus is Yahweh Shai. He says no, they're wrong. It's Yahweh Shah. Now let's make an argument for Yeshua, if we can. We'll show a graphic that we have.
Oh, and before you say anything, to let it be known, Yeshua would be the Hebrew or even Aramaic way to say Jesus' name, and it's also another form, the shortened form of Joshua's name, correct?
Exactly. And that's what. So at the top of the screen, we have now. Notice those little dots and dashes that they hate so much, right? This isn't from the New Testament. At the top of the screen, this is Joshua's name in this shortened or truncated or hyperchoristic form as it appears in Nehemiah 8:17. In Nehemiah 8:17, it refers to Yeshua ben Nun. It's talking about Joshua, but it's giving this hyperchoristic form of his name, or this shorter form of the name Joshua, Yeshua. And I included the nikudot, the dots and dashes, the diacritic marks as they appear in the Masoretic text. So when you go by that system, by the dots and dashes in the Masoretic text, this is pronounced Yeshua. So, proponents of Lasha and Kodash and also Judah Natzarah could say, well, that's just some pronunciation that was added in with those dots and dashes. But here's an example of something that's corroborated many centuries before by the Septuagint. Right underneath that, the second line has how that word, long before the dots and dashes were added to the Hebrew text, how it was transcribed, how it was transliterated in the Septuagint. And they come up with Yesu. So it seems clear that, speaking of which, the third character is the wa, which he claims can't be pronounced u. According to the Masoretic text, in this instance, it's pronounced u, it's Yeshua. But notice that many centuries before, because remember, he said that the sound was introduced into Arabic in the 7th century. That was his understanding. The Septuagint predates that by about 7 centuries, 6 or 7 centuries, and they transliterate this word Yesu, which shows that the writers of the Septuagint understood the wa in this case to be pronounced u. Underneath that, we have the name of Jesus as it appears in the Septuagint, in the Peshitta, which is the Syrian Aramaic translation of the Bible. Jesus's name is written in the same consonantal structure, and I put in the diacritical marks, the Syriac diacritical marks for Western Syriac. Eastern Syriac has a somewhat different pronunciation, but Western Syriac, it's also pronounced Yeshu. And then underneath that, I have the Christian Arabic rendering of Jesus's name, as you'll find in Christian Bibles, and it's Yeshua. So in all these cases, it's assumed that the wa is pronounced u. By the way, could we get the thing where we color code the characters? Could we put that image in?
Yep. So, I mean, so far what we're showing is, just to kind of give a brief synopsis, is that Judah Natzarah is in way over his head. He doesn't understand much of this, and I think a lot of this is lost on him because he seems to have an unfamiliarity with a lot of these things, at least superficially speaking from what he's presented. Now, if he does know this, only Lord knows. But I again want to just reiterate this for the audience. I think that it's a case of either he is being willingly deceptive, where he's going out on a limb to just, he knows this, but he wants to advocate for this dialect for whatever reason, whether it be to go against the grain or whatever the case may be, or he is absolutely unfamiliar with this to the point where, I mean, his ignorance is just beaming in every attempt that he makes to try to explain any of this. And but and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm just making an observation of what I see. But but go right ahead, and if you could bring out the
So the only reason we did this is for those unfamiliar with the scripts, was just to show the corresponding characters. The top line, which is Yeshua as it appears in Nehemiah 8:17, is it's Yod Shin Vav Ayin. Now each of those characters correspond exactly to a character in the Syriac or Syrian Aramaic and Arabic renderings of Jesus's name that are on the last 2 lines. The only difference is that in the Arabic it uses a sin instead of a sheen, but essentially, the sheen and the sin were once one character, so I think it's a minor difference. But so it's the yod and then it's yod shin wa ayin in both the Hebrew rendering and the Syrian Aramaic rendering, and then in the Arabic it's yasin wa ayin. It's the exact spelling, and in each case it's Yeshua, Yeshu, Yasua. All of them clearly agree with each other that the wa in this case is pronounced u, and like we said, when you go to the Septuagint rendering, you get a transliteration it's the exact transliteration that you find for Jesus in the New Testament, in the Greek New Testament, which is Yesu. Like, these all support each other in terms of how to pronounce this name.
Right. And I think mean, so far, let me see. Give me one moment. You know, another thing that I find interesting is that despite the fact that we'll bring out all this evidence, if history is any indicator of how he will react to this, I would not be surprised, again, and I say this with no malice in mind, despite what I really, you know, how I actually perceive the guy. I really want to try to be as fair as possible, but again, I won't be surprised if he decides to make a response video and it's, you know, profanity laden, just ad hominems for, you know, the first, you know, 40, 50 minutes. And then, you know, when he actually addresses some of the objections, then he begins to like straw man us. I would hope that that's not the case. You know, Lord willing, we'll actually get a good discourse and he can actually attempt to rebuttal a lot of the information that we're bringing out with factual, you know, counter rebuttals. You know, hopefully they're not misrepresenting us, but I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. I just get a feeling that it's going to be what, you know, we typically expect from him, but we'll see. So what would be the next clip that we're bringing up?
Well, I think we're about to segue. I just wanted to say real quick, I mean, as you mentioned, here's the thing. When he responds to this, this is something that needs to be kept in mind. By our appeals to the Septuagint, we have evidence on our side for our position, which is the position basically that characters in Hebrew and also other Semitic languages can be vocalized in a variety of ways. We have the ancient evidence. So for him to make his claims, he can't just make claims and expect us to take it on faith. He needs to present evidence for his claims. What's the evidence that he has? We have ancient evidence. I don't believe he has any ancient evidence. But if I can, maybe we'll just do a quick segue on, and again, I'm not trying to be abusive, but on some of his curious mistakes, some of his like weird, maybe weird is too abusive, forgive me, but things that he say that are curious and show a poorly thought out line of thought, stuff that's borderline contradictions. So, like maybe if we could show the clip of him, you know, saying these guys are Edomites, they're not Asians, you know, this kind of stuff, or. And we can also get. Oh, and remember we were discussing Rashi. After this, we should get into his stuff with Rashi. Right. That's a good one to show too. But yeah.
Oh, and after Jay plays this, I'm going to bring out something just to something I think is a little hilarious and, you know, goes with this. But yeah, go right ahead, brother.
Wait a minute. Harold Wallace Rosenthal does not look like an African, an Asian. He looks like an Edomite to me, fella. So his dialect clearly is incorrect, right? Clearly. Now, you know, if this part two, we'll get to that in a second too, because remember, we deal with the alphabets. Okay, Arabic, Hebrew, we can go, you know, it just goes on and on and on. Syriac, Aramaic, blah, blah, blah. It's not important right now. What is important is this saying that everybody is has the wrong dialect. But these people come from Germany, Poland, and Russia. So how the have the correct dialect of an Afro-Asiatic linguistic branch? How is that possible?
Right. Well, if I could point something out, if his argument is hinged upon the location of the people, then by the same logic, that means he doesn't have the correct dialect since he lives currently in Japan, and he's originally from America. So therefore, using just by deductive reasoning, I guess, hey, your dialect is false because you weren't born in the land of Israel. You don't actually speak the language fluently, and I'm just using. So
what would his rebuttal be to that? I mean, I think I know what his rebuttal would be. He would say he's an Israelite, he's a Semite, or he might say Shemite. He's a Semite, so therefore he can speak Semitic languages. It's also why he appealed to Arabs. Regardless of where they're found in the globe, they're Semites. They understand Semitic languages. He's trying to say that these languages fall into the Afro-Asiatic language family, and therefore these people who he's pointing to couldn't possibly be right on anything because they're not Semites. But what are they? He says they're Edomites. And this is this is why I wanted to show that clip. It shows a sort of, and again, I'm not trying to be overly disrespectful, but honestly, the phrase cognitive dissonance comes to mind, or at least just a poorly thought out argument to say I'm a Semite and he's not a Semite because he's an Edomite. I'm from Israel, and he's not
Wait.
from West Asia because he's an Edomite. The great irony is, aren't Edomites Semites from West
Right.
Asia?
Well,
He said he doesn't look like an Asian. He looks like an Edomite.
Using his terminology, Edomites are Shemitic people, right? The Israelites are Shemitic people. So it begs the question, when Jacob and Esau spoke to one another, was Esau somehow speaking what he claims to be quote unquote Yiddish, and then was Jacob speaking the Abaga, Hebrew? And, how exactly were these two communicating with one another? That's the first part. The second part is the obvious part. They both had the same mother and father. So Esau and the Edomites, by extension, were Shemitic people. They come from the line of Shem, right?
Yeah.
And
They're
in fact,
Hebrews. Yeah.
they're Hebrews, come from the line of Abraham, right? How about this? Here's the interesting thing, and I thought I would bring this out. I do this all the time with different Hebrew Israelism proponents, who hold to these sort of skewed color arguments or colored views, or I wouldn't even say colored views. In this case, he's just making an appeal to, well, they don't look like they should be Israelites, therefore they can't know what they're talking about. How about this? Since he mentioned Esau, isn't it interesting that we have an actual Israelite from antiquity who describes Jacob and Esau physically? So this is from this is Antiquities of the Jews, book 1, chapter 18, section 6. And it reads, "So Jacob obeyed his mother according to all her instructions. Now when the supper was got ready, he took a goat skin and put it about his arms, that by reason of its hairy roughness, he might by his father be believed to be Esau. For they being twins, and in all things else alike," let me repeat that again, "for they being twins, and in all things else alike, differed only in this thing." And isn't it ironic that this is actually Josephus's commentary of Genesis 27, that we see that this lines up exactly with what scripture says in Genesis 27 and verse 11 and Genesis 25:24. In fact, the Hebrew word tomim, which appears in Genesis 25:24, when it talks about twins were in her womb, that word in Hebrew literally means twins. In fact, if anybody who uses Strong's Concordance, although I have reservations, that people lean on that, but needless to say, if they want to look at it, they can go ahead and look at H8380. And I mean, other than Esau's hairiness, Jacob and Esau were physically indistinguishable. So why this appeal to the way that people look? Granted, the Israelites were scattered into all nations. I'm sure that all these different people groups are scattered into all nations. Isn't it possible that you can have people who descend physically from Esau who potentially could look nothing like Esau looked? Isn't it possible that you have people who descend from Jacob who look nothing like how Jacob looked? Or is his belief that you just have this streamlined look, which I'm sure he doesn't believe that, because he advocates, I think he's one of the few Hebrew Islamism proponents who advocates for interracial marriage. So, why make this sort of faulty argument against these people and automatically assume that they have to be absolutely wrong on the pronunciations based on the way that they look? Isn't that a bit of a, I'm trying to think of what fallacy that is. There's a fallacy for that, isn't there, Abu? You have to unmute, Abu. You're muted right now.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is. Forgive me, I was a little distracted. I'm looking at Rashi right
now. So ultimately, I just think that it's a fallacious argument. What do you say to that? It's just, that's the and not to mention, it's like, there's really nothing else that needs to be said. I think that we easily show that to be just.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to show that just because it does show that it's very strange to say he's not an Asian, he's an Edomite. He's not a Semite, he's an Edomite. It's like he's letting his thoughts run ahead of him, or and again, this is going to sound disrespectful.
Go ahead. Isn't it interesting that he's also incorporating the Edomite doctrine from the one Westers into his own worldview?
Yeah, the people he says who didn't influence him. Yeah,
right, that didn't influence him. But meanwhile, he's incorporating those sort of ideas into his worldview. But go figure. But you were saying something about Rashi.
Yeah, we have a clip. And again, I mean, we're going to get into some more serious stuff in a moment. But again, I just wanted to, in this sort of segue, to show some of his just strange errors, And there's a point where he opens up his like stone edition Chumash, or maybe it's a Tanakh. And this is again in his video where he's trying to teach you, faithful. He's trying to teach faithful to God something. And so he's going to show faithful to God the difference between Hebrew and Yiddish. Now, of course, faithful knows this. Again,
quote unquote.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. More than like we said on that same dividing line from July of 2016, faithful showed he got into the difference between Yiddish and Hebrew, and he's done it many, many times on his own YouTube page. But so he attempts. So this is his video from this month where he's trying to refute faithful, and he's going to attempt to try to show the difference between Hebrew and Yiddish.
Because while we're in the subject, you see this here? See this here? Language of the Torah, right? Look at that. Look at this. You probably can't see it. This is Yiddish. No one knows what the This is not the language of the Torah right here. They're using Hebrew, or what you call Hebrew, characters, but it's not the language. It's some other language. Okay? This is your Yiddish, your Jewish language. This is the language of the Torah. Jetpack Raccoon doesn't understand that because his head is so far up the white man's. Okay? Then the nigga wonder why his nose smells like shit. Okay? Because his nose is the white man's. Get some respect. Being a Django.
But I don't know if anybody realized that, man. Do you know how difficult it was to edit that? Like this guy was just like dropping F-bombs and everything, just like, I mean, just back to back. I mean, just using all sort of derogatory, just using profanities left and right. I mean, that sounded like an episode of Jerry Springer, right?
Yes, the beep, because, and that's a good example of just cursing nonstop. But here's the ironic thing. He pointed to, now you getting, I don't know, he won't have it in his Stone Edition Chumash, but you can get certain, documents out there that'll have the Masoretic text and then a Yiddish commentary or Yiddish translation. Certain editions of Mikrot Gedolot do that.
But before you get into that, I just wanted to point out, someone in the live audience made the observation that he says it's Yiddish, but then no one knows what it is.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Yeah, nobody knows what the bleep this says. That's what he said. Well, he doesn't know what it says, but there are plenty of people who understand it. What he pointed to, he was showing the page in his Stone Edition Chumash or Tanakh. It has to be the Chumash because I don't think there's a Tanakh with Rashi like that in it, or maybe I'm wrong. But whatever the case, he's showing an art scroll, which, by the way, is a rabbinic Ashkenazi edition of the. I mean, they try to use some Sephardic transcriptions or stuff like that, but nonetheless, ultimately, it's Ashkenazi Jews by and large which produce art scroll documents. So it's an Orthodox mainstream Jewish edition of the Torah or Tanakh, and on the page it has the commentary of Rashi, and Rashi is a Jewish commentator from the 11th century, and his commentary is written in Hebrew. If a person who only knew Yiddish tried to read Rashi's commentary, he wouldn't understand just about any of it. 99% of it he wouldn't be able to understand, except for those rare words that that Yiddish and Hebrew have in common. But he wouldn't be able to understand it. A person who knows Hebrew would be able to read.
Wait. You got to qualify that, because you know how conspiratorial these guys are. They may try to take your words and spin it and try to say, "See, he's saying it right there. They don't understand Hebrew because we're the ones that speak the real Hebrew." And
well, yeah. What I'm saying is there are certain people who only, and I don't think there's too many of them exist today, but maybe in a few isolated communities in upstate New York or Brooklyn or something like that, there have historically been lots of people, and maybe there's small pockets of them to this day. There are people who only know Yiddish, or at least know Yiddish and do not know any Hebrew. Those kind of people. So these aren't like people, citizens of modern Israel or something like that, the modern nation state called Israel. But nonetheless, if just hypothetically speaking, a person who only knew Yiddish would not be able to read Rashi. A person who knows Hebrew would be able to understand most of it. Of course, there's, he's writing in the 11th century, so there might be some locutions that are a little weird. But nonetheless, he was showing specifically when he was pointing to the text, he was pointing to Rashi's second commentary on Genesis 1:26, when it says Na'aseh Adam, Rashi comments on that phrase Na'aseh Adam twice in Genesis 1:26. Let us make man, or we will make man. He's pointing to Rashi's commentary on that. So I went ahead and looked at the page, and not only is it's straightforward Hebrew, just about every single word is found in biblical Hebrew. It's found in the Tanakh. I could only find maybe one or two words, maybe three, that aren't in there. Now, of course, some of them are conjugated differently, but like all the common roots are there. Like the root of a word will also be found in biblical Hebrew and stuff like that. The only really word that I could find when I was looking through that portion of Rashi's commentary was he has the word siuhu, the aiding him, or the people who are aiding him. That's what the phrase means. He uses the phrase siuhu. That's basically the only one of maybe only a handful of words in Rashi's commentary on that page, which cannot be found in biblical Hebrew. So not only is it Hebrew, it's even essentially lining up with biblical Hebrew in that portion. I'm not saying Rashi always lines up with biblical Hebrew, but by the way, Rashi sometimes uses, if Judah Natzarah had turned forward one page and turned back one page, one of the things he would have seen, and I believe he's aware of this, is that Rashi sometimes uses foreign words. Actually, maybe whatever the case, Rashi uses foreign words, but whenever he transliterates a foreign word into the Hebrew script, he introduces it by saying be'la'az or be'lo'ez, in a foreign tongue, essentially. Like for example, in all over the place, he'll use a French word to an 11th century French word to explain the concept that he's trying to describe. But so there are foreign words in Rashi's text that aren't Hebrew, but whenever that happens, he introduces it by saying be'lo'az, be'lo'ez, in a foreign tongue, or in as the foreigners say.
Yeah, and
but the point is, he pointed to a Hebrew text and said, this is Yiddish. By the way, if he responds to this, one thing he might do is he might complain about how the script looks somewhat different. It became the convention in around the 15th or 16th century to write Rashi's commentary in a sort of Sephardic semi-cursive. So the script is a little bit different, but Rashi never wrote in that script. This is like a 15th century, 16th century convention where they would use this semi-cursive script for Rashi. And I imagine he might try to say, well, the script looks different. I don't understand the script, therefore it can't be Hebrew, whatever.
Right. All right. So I believe that we have another clip. And I would hope that if and when he responds to this video, he will actually engage our arguments and not necessarily, make it like 90% ad hominems and then strawman something and then try to, use some obscure source or, try to make an appeal to something that he himself has not looked into, because best believe, Mr. Natzarah, if you're listening to this, that we will respond to you. And I would hope that you're fact checking your information, because we certainly are.
Yeah.
And,
real quick about this clip we're going to show. I noticed somebody in the live chat was mentioning that they'd like to get a little bit of discussion on Yahweh Shai. I mean, we sort of did that when we got into Yeshua, but we're going to touch on Yahweh Shai a little bit here. He has a clip where he mentions it. Also, the question of shalom or shalom versus shalom. We're going to get into that as well here. Listen to what he says. He's responding to another proponent of Lasha and Kodash. He's having a disagreement with a proponent of Lasha and Kodash on the pronunciation of Jesus' name and the pronunciation of the word for peace. And this will help us segue into some interesting phenomenon in the Hebrew language, which is acknowledged both by the Masoretic text and the ancient transliterations, which we mentioned before. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Jay, you got to mute. Even
ISUPK says that the word shalom is not used. Even when I cited scripture, the word shalom is used. It's used for reward or recompense. When they use shalom, there's a W in there. He tries to say that it's silent, but they say Yahweh Shai. So if the W was silent, then they better say Yahweh Shai. But they would never say that. So even they're confused on the language because they don't speak it.
I do apologize for that. My goodness, man.
What happened? Cursing? Some cursing got through?
No. I mean, it's just okay. So here's the thing. Actually, Jake, can you play that clip one more time? Play it one more time, please.
Even ISUPK says that the word shalom is not used. Even when I cited scripture, the word shalom is used. It's used for reward or recompense. When they use shalom, there's a W in there. He tries to say that it's silent, but they say Yahweh Shai. So if the W was silent, then they better say Yahashai. But they would never say that. So even they're confused on the language because they don't speak it.
You know what's ironic? In his post, when we had our back and forth, he used the phrase shalom. And then in other places, I'll notice that he'll say shalom, like, or at least in some of his older videos.
I can explain the history of this because this actually ties in with One West as well. If I may.
Yeah, go ahead. Go right ahead.
So before we get to Judah Natzarah, just the history of One West. One West used to insist that the word for peace is shalom. It's not shalom, right? And so over the years, people started pointing out, but wait, it's spelled with a wa. You know, you can see shalom everywhere. And so some people started saying shalom, but there were some people who tried to double down on shalom. I remember seeing members of HODC way back in the 90s trying to say that it's pronounced together shalom or something like that, you know? And he's saying that he ran into someone from ISUPK trying to insinuate that maybe the wa is silent. The point is that over the years, people figured out that the word for peace, he says for reward and stuff like that, but the word shalom does appear in the Hebrew Bible. It even appears in a person's name. We're going to bring this up later. Absalom, in English we say Absalom. Absalom, the father of peace. That's literally what his name means. And you can see in a lot of places that it's spelled shalom with a wa. But we're going to get into that. But the point is that One West originally insisted on shalom, and you still have people like the ISUPK insisting on shalom. But some people over the years have figured out that, wait, sometimes in scripture it's spelled with a wa. So you have this sort of uncertainty, and I guess in Judah Natzarah's case, he's trying to say it can be used in different contexts with or without the wa. But he's still going to say shalom in some cases and shalom in others. But, you know, there's this slow learning process for all the proponents of Lasha and Kadosh on this over the course of decades.
Right. And, you know, I just find it interesting that this sort of line of argumentation is being employed, and they're seemingly trying to cast doubt on others who are very familiar with these sort of arguments and, you know, the different information and what have you. But for whatever reason, man, I mean, it's ironic because even in the very name Jerusalem, right? You have I believe the same root as shalom, right? The very same root as shalom in Jerusalem. Isn't it ironic that when one looks at Jeremiah 14:2 in the Septuagint, the transliteration there is Jerusalem, right? So it's implied Jerusalem, right? So why is it that, again, the pronunciation incorporates the sort of vowels that he believes that are you know, with the U, the fact that the actually, let me actually pull it up if I can find it. Actually, I had it right in front of me. Okay, so this is from Blue Letter Bible. I just want to highlight this so that the audience can see it. You know, I look at these sort of things and I think to myself, anybody who is a studious researcher is going to, and if you see it, it's highlighted on my screen.
Can I make one comment here? So you're pulling up a verse where Jerusalem is mentioned, Jerusalem in the Masoretic text and in the Septuagint, Jerusalem. There might be the question, well, you know, who knows? Maybe these guys didn't see this verse. The significance of Jeremiah 14:2 is all these guys bring this verse up quite often. It's one of their favorite verses. Judah mourneth, eats thereof languish, you know, the black unto the ground, and so on. But I'm sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to point that out. This isn't some verse they're unfamiliar with. This is a verse they look at quite often.
Well, the irony here is that, again, I don't think he realizes. I don't think he's quite catching this. I think that his presuppositions blind him from critically examining the holes in his, you know, his own argument, because I think that in his mind, again, I just keep harping back on this. I think that he believes that if he is proven to be wrong, in some capacity, I don't know. It's like a very strange dichotomy. Like if he's wrong, then everything that he believes is wrong and everything that they say is right. I almost get that vibe. I'm not trying to say that's what he's saying. I just get that sort of vibe from him in terms of the way that he argues.
Tacitly,
right. Again, now I'm not saying that that's his argument. Again, lest he try to say that I'm straw manning him. That's not what I'm doing. I'm simply stating what sort of vibe that I get from him whenever he argues the way that he does. Now, needless to say, that's that. I'm gonna stop presenting this, and we're gonna go ahead and go into.
Well, actually, that clip that we showed of him talking about Yahweh Shai and talking about Shalom and Shalom, and it allows us to get into another issue with the way the Masoretic text works and what the ancient transliterations imply. Since he's insisting on this situation where characters can be pronounced only one way, I wonder how his system explains variant spellings, where a variant spelling can have the wa or leave it out. So, for example, that's the case with Jacob. That's the case with Absalom. That's the case with Joshua, with the name Joshua, which he claims is pronounced Yahweh Shah. And
very quickly, because I know he may attempt to try to use this argument. So he'll try to. I'm sure he's going to try to make the one-to-one correlation with Salam, but I don't think he realizes that, for example, Salam incorporates the Sim, the Lamid, and the Mim.
Alif. Yeah, Aleph.
Aleph, that's right. Yes. So
it's a very common thing in Arabic that sometimes Arabic and Hebrew words, they'll have common words, and where the Hebrew has a wa, the Arabic corresponding word will be spelled the same, except that the fact that it'll have an alif in its case. I mean, there's a lot of words like that.
I'm utterly amazed that he doesn't know that, though. I mean, or at the very least, he gives off the impression. I'm wondering if he thinks that the way that it's spelled in Arabic is the same way that it's spelled in Hebrew, and that somehow the pronunciation in Arabic is verifying the fraudulent, pronunciation that he's advocating for. I guess, but I guess he so it's just ridiculous. But needless to say. All right, so you were going to say.
In the last clip that we showed, he mentions, Yahweh Shai, and all this stuff. So I wanted to get into variant spellings in the Tanakh itself, in the Torah itself. Even in his little in his stone edition Chumash that he has, we'll see this. That I wonder how his system explains these variant spellings. Like he might try to wave it off as a scribal error, not understanding what's going on. Yeah, here we go. Here's an example of this. So everyone on their screen can see up in the circle at the top of the screen, you have the spelling for Jacob, Yaakov, right? And this is the standard spelling, right? That they would say, well, not the proponents of Lasha and Kodash would say Yaikwab. I'm guessing he says something like Yaakwab or Yaquab or something like that. But notice it doesn't have the wa. If you go to Leviticus 26:42, there's an alternative spelling with the wa, and it's colored in blue there. So it's spelled differently. And also this comes up again in about 4 places in Jeremiah towards the bottom of the screen. You can see that. Now, here's the thing. According to the system of standard Hebrew, mainstream Hebrew, whether it's the Hebrew of the Masoretic text or modern Israeli Hebrew, the understanding is that with or without the wa, it can be pronounced the same way. And now, so with the wa, it can be pronounced, Yaakov, and without the wa, it can be pronounced Yaakov, right? Now, is that something that was introduced by the Masoretic text or by Yiddish? The answer is no, because again, when we go back to these ancient transliterations, we can see that the Septuagint renders it Yaakov, regardless of whether it had the wa or not. And I think that's significant. And if he ever does do a response, I'd like to see how he explained this, because he would have to pronounce this alternative spelling as something like Ya'akwawab or something like that, rather than Yaquab, And we have other examples of this. Can we jump to another example?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Maybe, for example, with I guess maybe we could show 2 Samuel.
Yep, the second Samuel one.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So this will allow us to get into Absalom, because he was talking about Shalom and Shalom and all that. Yeah, right. Here's Absalom. Now, Absalom literally means the father of peace. There are places, usually it's spelled with the wa. There's a bunch of places where it's spelled without the wa. And funny enough, in 2 Samuel 16:16, it's spelled in two different ways in the same single verse. And yet in the Septuagint, it's transliterated the same way. According to the Hebrew of the pointing of the Masoretic text, either spelling would be pronounced Abshalom. That's the same thing with modern Israeli Hebrew. And so we'd ask the question again, is this something that was introduced with the pointing of the Masoretic text or with Yiddish? And the answer is no. Many centuries before, the transliterations in the Septuagint treated both spellings as Abe Salom, you know? And so, like, for him, he would have to say one is Abba Shalawam and the other one's Abba Shalom, you know, but it's referring to the same person, clearly. And maybe we can give another example, because since he was talking about Yahweh Shai and Yahweh Shah, we can show the example of Joshua's name, you know?
Indeed. And I mean, to me, man, this is so cut, dry, very to the point, but it seems like a lot of this is lost on him, man. I don't know.
Again, up in the circle, we have the standard spelling of Joshua. So Yehoshua. The proponents of Lasha and Kodash, the one Westers, would say it's pronounced Yahweh Shai. That's how their pronunciation system. He doesn't pronounce the ayin as I. He insists that it's ah. And so he would say Yahweh Shah.
Right.
Yeah. But here's the thing. You go to Deuteronomy 3:21, you have the same sort of variant spelling, where now, according to the Masoretic text, this would be Yehoshua with or without the wa. And I wonder if he has to be forced into insisting on a different pronunciation because of a different spelling. You know, it's an interesting question. You know,
Right.
I'd like to see what his thoughts are, or how he explains this. I wonder if he's just going to try and wave it all off as scribal errors or something like
that. or he may try to, try to make his typical ad hominem conspiracy theory, objections, where it's like, oh, this is the white man, the white man is they're getting their knowledge from the white man. Meanwhile, he's getting his stuff from like Lou White's website, who's a white man, and different things of that nature, which I find to be a bit ironic. But needless to say, I think that so far we pretty much, I think we've driven this home. Unless do you think that we should bring out a few more things, maybe to really put this one to bed?
Sure, if you want to. Go ahead.
Well, for example, I mentioned earlier that we were going to look at Hebrew and Yiddish, because he tends to be of the belief that when you say Elohim, for example, that's somehow Yiddish. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show to the brother Jay. You could actually see it in the group chat. It's the link to Omniglot, and it actually has the Yiddish reading with transliteration intact of Genesis 11:5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you read that, and then I'm going to have you go to Bible Hub, if you could. You actually pull that up, my brother. If you could go to Bible Hub to Genesis 11:5 in the interlinear, so people can see the difference. All right, so if you could definitely do that. All right, so could you actually zoom in, my brother? Zoom in into if you actually scroll, go back to the Omniglot and scroll down till you see verse 5. No, down. And yeah, verse 5. Do you see verse 5? Yeah, there you go. And if you could zoom in a little bit, just so the audience can really get a glimpse, get a close up. Now, this is the Yiddish. This is the transliteration. Scroll up again, my brother. Scroll up. Let me see. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it would be, if you could go to the fifth one on down. Now, notice the spelling, notice everything. Yeah, if you could. Now, here's the interesting thing to note. Since this is the Yiddish incorporating the Hebrew script, the square script, which they would call the Assyrian, right? Abu, they would refer to the square script as the Assyrian.
Ashuri, yep, which literally means Assyrian, yep.
Right. What they would end up doing is, if they know anything about Hebrew, they'd realize that the spelling here is different than the spellings that we might find in the Masoretic text, because it's using a completely different language. It's Yiddish, which is incorporating the square script, right? Now, if you can go to the bottom, my brother Jay, and I'll go ahead and read the verse. No, you got to go up to verse 5 in the transliteration. Yep, there you go. So it is Hak Gap. and I'm gonna butcher this because I don't know Yiddish. Hab got upper gindert sut zen stu stit dem turem was die Metiskinder hoben geboit. Now, this is Yiddish, right? This is actual Yiddish. Now, let's look at the difference between this and the Masoretic text and, the transliteration there. Okay, so that would be in Genesis 11:5 in Bible Hub. All right. So now we're going to look at the vast difference in the pronunciation. Okay. So if you could go to the interlinear, so we could check this out. All right. Now look what it says right here. Now it says Ve'et ha'ir et lirot Yahweh Vayeret ha'adam bene banu aser hamigidal. Now, notice that there's a difference, a complete difference. This is the same verse, the exact same verse, Genesis 11:5. This one incorporates the Masoretic text. The one that we read is the Yiddish transliteration. Notice that completely different pronunciations. Neither one is at all the same, right? That's the first thing to know. But
completely different spellings. I mean, it might as well be comparing English to Vietnamese or something. The only thing that's common is the script.
But according to the line of argumentation that Lasha and Kodash proponents employ, this pronunciation would be Yiddish to them. The one that we're looking at the screen right now, this would be Yiddish. Yet we just saw Yiddish and realized that the pronunciations aren't even close.
Yeah,
because
they claim.
Yeah,
it requires an ignorance of both Hebrew and Yiddish. Basically, the people who make this claim, that's what they're showing. I mean, not to be disrespectful, but seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm absolutely positively appalled anytime that I hear any of these guys making reference to when they say modern Israeli Hebrew, which, by the way, for those who don't know, because I think the argument also hinges on their ignorance of I guess, the history of Hebrew. Eliezer ben Yehuda, when he decided to make the liturgical language the spoken language, right? Because it wasn't being used in day-to-day life, I guess, amongst European Jews and things of that nature. And yet he wanted to, well, I would say even just Jews roundabout, right? It was mainly a liturgical language, right? Very similar to what we might see, for example, with, like, for example, certain communities of Yemeni Jews might incorporate some of the Aramaic, but their regular pronunciations would have been their specific dialect, right? Whatever dialect, maybe, with certain Arabic influence because they were living in Yemen. If you, for example, go to Spain, you might see Ladino, right? Ladino would have been the spoken dialect of the Spanish Jews. However, when they were reading the Torah, the Torah, they would have used, the liturgical language, which would have been Hebrew. So in that context, they would have used the Hebrew, but in the spoken everyday language, they would have used Ladino or, whatever the case may be. And I think that they don't realize that German Jews, incorporated the Yid, or I would say that they, the Yiddish language. And so that would have been their day-to-day speaking language. So what Eliezer ben Yehuda proposed was that they would make the liturgical language the spoken language of the people, with certain modern terms being Semiticized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a fair assessment? So
yeah, definitely.
Right. So it wasn't this idea that somehow the dialect that Eliezer ben Yehuda introduced was somehow created, like they sat down and decided, oh, let's devise this dialect or something. Rather, what they did was they took the dialect that was, again, being used liturgically. In other words, every time that they opened up a Hebrew scroll and they read, this would have been the dialect that they used. So they incorporated that language with modern terms, maybe even terms like, for example, anybody that's ever heard an Israeli speak, they might refer to history as historia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is, I think, something akin to the Ladino, right? They incorporated a lot of those elements into the language.
Mm-hmm.
So
a lot of words, psicologia for psychology,
right?
Autobus for bus, universita for university,
right?
Yeah. So modern Israeli Hebrew. I mean, clearly, they're there's words that didn't exist, so they had to adopt foreign
Right.
words. Obviously, there's foreign words, and also, I mean, very slight grammatical differences and stuff like that. And so, and as you're saying, I mean, to make this clear, because Judah Natzarah's argument is that we're just siding with the Ashkenazis on all this. You know, that's all we do. We don't. I mean, we're planning on doing a series on Lasha and Kodash. Faithful and I, we're going to have a short series in the near future, God willing, inshallah. We're going to have this, and we will show interesting things. And one of the things that we might show is there, as we mentioned earlier in this program, is there are places where the ancient transliterations disagree with the Masoretic text and disagree with the modern Israeli Hebrew. So of course, you know, we're not saying, well, whatever the, you know, modern Ashkenazi Jews say, then that's the truth. That's not the case. We're appealing to the ancient evidence. And really, that's the real issue here. We have ancient evidence on our side, and it just so happens that the ancient evidence, by and large, not always, but by and large, agrees with the mainstream position.
Right.
Judah Natzarah doesn't have ancient evidence on his side.
Well, I would say that I find it interesting, for example, that he came to the realization, at the very least, I'll say this, you know, to say something positive to him, so it's not just all, you know, completely negative. At the very least, he was willing to concede that the Sade, which is pronounced Taza by Lasha and Kodash proponents, was incorrect.
Yeah,
So
props to him.
So at the very
Credit to
least,
Judah Natzarah on that one. He
Right.
diverged from them there.
right now,
Their most absurd example. Yeah, it's the most
Right.
absurd aspect of Lasha and Kodash. He didn't fall into that trap, or he corrected himself at some point down the line.
Now, isn't it interesting though? Because I think we talked about this a little bit prior to going live. That he's even now he doesn't pronounce Israel or Yisrael as Yasher Allah. Now he's pronouncing it as, and I'll let you.
Yasher El. Yasher El.
Yasher El.
Since August, at least as far back as August, he's been insisting that now the Aleph is all of a sudden. There's other videos where he's telling people, I don't know where you're getting your E's from, but it seems like
he said in our back and forth in the correspondence that we had, he in the chat when we were attempting to set up the debate, which brings me to another point I'll bring up in a moment, which is a silly point from his end. Yeah, you can stop presenting, my brother. You know, one of the things that he mentioned was that I asked him, how many vowels are there in Hebrew? And he said that every vowel except for you. Right, every vowel except for you. So, you know, so no. And this is the funny thing, because he's seemingly arguing for one thing, and then when he talks to someone else, it's like he changes up his argument. So I don't know if this is like a new evolution in his, you know, faulty line of arguing. You know, now apparently the U is somehow like this, you know, like there's this devious plot to insert U's. You know,
yeah, exactly. It only happened in the 7th century or the 10th century, despite the fact that our most ancient evidence of how Hebrew was pronounced shows that phoneme already existed.
Right,
that vocalization already existed.
Exactly, that we've shown in the transliterations made by the Israelites themselves. For example, the Septuagint, for example, the New Testament writers who by and large were Israelites. In their own transliterations, they incorporated U sounds all throughout, but somehow this was an invention of the Masoretic text or whatever he's arguing for. I find it telling also. I find it telling that, you know, he said this about all the vowels are open be used except for the U, but then he seemingly says that the U in Judah. Now, granted, this is a English, you know, variant form of Yehuda, or you know, needless to say, it's ironic that he then said that was incorrect. Now, you know, I'm not going to go into the you know semantics of that. I mean, I could easily do that, but I just find it weird, because for all intents and purposes, then he's going to have to revise every single sort of pronunciation that he's brought forth, especially the ones where he only insists on using like the A vowel, you know, for example, you know, in like shalawam. I mean, if he says that the U is the only vowel that doesn't count, well, in actual Hebrew,
is he conceding to an O? Like, it's almost like he's evolving over time, and it looks like he might be ready. If he's saying every vowel except U, that seems to insinuate, well, you can have an O, which might mean that, hey, maybe in another 6 months or something like that, he'll say, okay, you can say shalom.
Right. Well, here's the interesting thing too. The fact that, we talk about this all the time, how the different novice proponents of these variant forms of Hebrew will go out on a limb and say something to the effect of, you can't use this vowel or that vowel. So, for example, a lot of them are very keen to Yasher Al because, I don't think they like the A vowel at the end, like the Lasha and Kodash proponents use. So they'll say Yasher Al, they'll just omit the A at the end, right?
And you know what's funny about that? We've discussed this before. So when One West itself had to sort of deal with this question of how do you know when a character is silent, like in Shalom, the mem, the last character of Shalom, or and a bunch of other examples. Like, how do you know when that's silent, where it just hits a stop? Or Kadar, right? They always insist on Quadar, right? They always, so the resh, the ra at the end just stops. It's silent. It's not ra. How do you know when it's silent, and how do you know when you vocalize it, like in Yasher Allah rather than Yasher Al? The interesting thing is One West started with this whole disdain for the nikudot, for the dots and dashes, the diacritical marks in the Masoretic text. Yet to explain when they arbitrarily have a stop, a silent character, and when they have it pronounced A, they introduced their own diacritical marks.
Right.
They created their own little, just like, it looks like a frowny face and a smiley face. It's very funny.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, I'm going to say this, man. Hopefully when we go into the series and we start to bring out, for example, the different, we're going to go into this a little more deeper. We're going to show all the, I think with what we presented tonight, they don't have an answer for this. I really don't believe that they have any legitimate answer. They might start to grasp at straws. You might see a lot of conspiracy theories come out, a lot of ad hominem, but I don't think that they're going to have, and I'm saying this since we're mainly directing this at Torah Nights, but this is also definitely being, the same arguments that we're presenting here would be levied at the other Lasha and Kodash proponents like GMS.
Yes,
and
exactly.
But needless to say, they're not.
You know from experience, and I know from experience, we've been doing this for years. No one has wanted to engage in this. And one of the things that I've wanted to do is engage in a correspondence. Like, let's write it out, because all these guys are all over the internet. They're writing constantly on Twitter, Facebook, this, that, all these platforms they're writing on. If you can spend all those hours writing stuff, why don't we have spend some time on a correspondence on this subject? None of them want to do it. And I think the reason why is because in order to state your argument clearly in writing, you're not going to be able to yell. Your cursing will seem more superfluous in writing. And most importantly, a saying that I love bringing up, clear writing requires clear thinking. And so since they're not clear in their thoughts on this subject, they can't argue for it clearly in writing. But I've always wanted to have a correspondence on this subject, and as you know, you've tried it in comment sections in the old Truth After Knowledge videos and stuff like that. None of these guys want to engage the subject,
Right.
And this includes elders, guys who have been leading One West groups for decades.
Indeed.
Shameful.
And by the way, for those who actually want to learn a little bit more on this topic, I highly recommend that you go to the Truth After Knowledge YouTube page. It's an older YouTube page, but there's a lot of old videos.
TAK Classics, because it was but also your own page. If anyone goes through Faithful to God's videos, there's videos on Lasha and Kodash, and also Vocab alone has Lasha and Kodash takedown.
Indeed. I actually have a video on my channel, which is a compilation of the videos that Abu had put together. It's entitled Lasha and Kodash Debunked. Again, Lasha and Kodash Debunked. And for those who want to know how to spell the Kodash, it's Qadash. All right. And you can find that on my channel. Just go into the search. Also, go to the TAK Classics YouTube channel. You'll see the 4 original videos there. They're actually in 4 separate parts. So if any of you would like to watch it separately, maybe something shorter, it's on there. Again, you can check out Vocab's channel. What were the 2 videos that you guys, the 2 hangouts that you did? Was the first one was called Abu?
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry about that. I had myself on mute. The first one that I did with Vocab was called Lasha and Kodash Takedown. and that's on his page. And then we did another one on the name of God. I forget the exact title, but it came right after that. It was right on the heels of that. And then we touched on it again a little bit recently in his latest video, which mentions Abba Bivens and Ariyah in the title. It's like his third most recent video of Vocab Malone's videos. Get into that.
Indeed, definitely. And
but like you said, and I said, like we both said tonight, God willing, we're going to have a clearer series on Lasha and Kodash. We're going to get into like the difference between script and language and some other issues, including some issues we discussed tonight, but also some stuff that we didn't bring out tonight.
Indeed. Well, I definitely think that covers everything. And I was glad that we were able to bring out the one at the end with Yiddish, but anybody that wants to, they can go ahead and this is such an easy thing to look up. It's such an easy refutation. They can just go to Wikipedia and see Yiddish and then look at the Hebrew article and notice that, Yiddish is a completely different language from Hebrew. And when I say Yiddish, I'm not talking about what they assume is Yiddish. I mean, Yiddish, as we've shown tonight, completely different language, different pronunciations. In fact, one of the things that I was going to make mention of is even the name of God. So, for example, in even the Masoretic Hebrew, it's YHWH. When you look at the Yiddish, it's G. What was it? GAT or something to that effect?
Yeah. Gimel Aleph Tav. No, not Tav. Tet, because Tav is a S in Yiddish.
Right.
Tet. So yeah, Got, which is like the German Gott. And also they also use another one. I don't know if it appears in Yiddish translations, but Yiddish uses it all the time. It's a especially strange term for God. They use Eibishter. You'll see them use this long term Eibishter. Right. Very dramatic. There's nothing similar there.
Exactly.
Just the script. So, by the way, for people who want to respond to this, I would recommend even leave some comments on this video. The comments board open, please. Let's have a correspondence there.
Absolutely. The comment section will be open on this video. So Judah Natzarah is more than welcome to leave his comments. The Torah nights. And again, I will say this ahead of time, that our discussion will be primarily on the topic of this video. If it segues into another direction, don't be surprised if you see your comments being removed. We are going to simply and exclusively discuss this topic. This is what
Semitic languages. Let's stay on Semitic languages because guys get emotional and say, "Let's talk about my lineage that I don't even know."
Right? No red herrings, no silly arguments, none of this. Why are you coming at us? Why don't you go after this group or that group? Let's keep it primarily on this topic. But with that being said, Abu, if anybody wants to reach you, how can they do so?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Abu Khamar, ABUKHAMR. I guess I can reach there. That's the gist of it. And also I have a YouTube page, Abu Khamar Al-Masihi. It's ABUKHAMR ALMASEEHEE. Forgive me, that's long. Just run Abu Khamar through a search. You'll find my videos.
All right. Definitely.
Or just contact Faithful to God and he'll find a way to get you to me, I guess.
Definitely. And so, again, we're going to have the comment section open so that we can have a correspondence with those who advocate for the dialect and even for Torah Nights who seemingly are evolving the dialect as we speak. And hopefully that they would evolve it into, a correct understanding. So, hey, hopefully our interactions will lead to that. And I definitely hope that this has been useful to brothers and sisters in Christ. I thank everybody for sticking around. I know it's late, but definitely going to try to make these a little earlier, Lord willing. And with that being said, man, one last thing before I forget. I guess I would also, I wanted to ask very quickly. If anybody wants to, look into reputable information, anything that might be useful as far as learning Hebrew is concerned, what would you recommend, Abu? If you could recommend anything, any sort of book?
There's so many books. Any book at any library on biblical Hebrew grammar will help you with biblical Hebrew, and just about any book. There's so many books out there. Another fun book. I think people will find it very helpful because they have these registers of the pu'alot, like how the different verb stems work in Hebrew. There's a lot of really good ones, but there's not much in English. But there's one book that, while it's very incomplete as far as the available verb stems, it's still very helpful, and it's also for modern Israeli Hebrew, but it's still very helpful, even if you're studying biblical Hebrew, is the book 501 Hebrew Verbs. For, as far as English resources go, it's very helpful in getting a concept of the verb stems, which is a concept that proponents of Lasha Kodash do not understand. They have no recognition of this, so that's helpful. But aside from that, anything on any standard grammar of biblical Hebrew could be helpful. To be honest. And for dictionaries, I really like Ruben Alcalay and Marcus Jastrow, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
As far as English is concerned, in Hebrew, there's what's his name, Ibn Shoshan, I think it is, but whatever.
Right, definitely. And for those who are wondering where they can find some of the videos that we mentioned, I'm actually going to go out and grab all the links. I'm going to put them in the description, so definitely check back, look in the description. All the videos will be there. And again, I want to thank you, Abu. We definitely proved that the dialect is, just false. There's really, no two ways around it. And like you said, we'll definitely try to put a series together sometime in the near future, Lord willing. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing Torah Knights and Judah Natzarah's responses. God bless you all. I hope this has edified someone out there, and take care.
God bless.